My name is John Nirenberg, and I will walk from Faneuil Hall in Boston to Nancy Pelosi's office in Washington, D.C. on December 1st, 2007, to urge her in the strongest possible terms to place impeachment back on the table. And I mean the impeachment of our president and vice president. For 6 years, this administration has had a completely free hand to break the law, to violate our understanding of the Constitution, to disregard our historical precedents regarding how Congress and the administration should relate to each other, because it had a Republican rubber-stamped Congress supporting their atrocities. They began a war in Iraq that was unprovoked and uncalled for. They have begun to torture people at will. They have denied American citizens the right to habeas corpus. They are now spying on us in our homes. They are taking the law into their own hands and declare themselves above the Constitution. For all of these reasons, I find that now is the time to do something more than just complain. And you might say, why did it take me so long? Well, for 6 years, of course, it all looked very hopeless. Because the administration was supported in Congress by a majority, because they've appointed the Supreme Court justices that favor their particular ideology, because the corporate media has been so established to support their line of thinking and the corporate mentality that has so pervaded our country, there was no way to dissent and get visible and reach people who should know about what's going on and should perhaps decide for themselves whether or not they like what's going on. So for 6 years, we were basically silenced. Then, in 2006, the Democrats won control of Congress, and those of us who believed there would be change hoped for the best, hoped that this war in Iraq would be put to an end, was hoping that the administration would be called to account for their misdeeds, for their lies, for their breaking the law, for their putting themselves above the Constitution. It's a year later, 2007. That has not happened yet. So, in disbelief that the entire Congress, Democrats and Republicans, were of one mind, or at least were caught up in the same traps that occur when wars are undertaken and lives have gone unaccounted for, that I was in despair. Where does a citizen turn when the hopes are raised that because the Congress is shifting control, that there might be some hope, and yet there wasn't? So I wrote letters to the editor, I called my congressman, I talked with my neighbors and friends about these things, almost to the point of distraction, because what was occurring and what the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States and the Attorney General of the United States were perpetrating was unconscionable to me. And I'll give you an example. When the Abu Ghraib scandal hit, there was actually discussions about what is torture, whether or not we should use torture. And in my view, there is no discussion. We had agreed that all civilized societies, even in a time of war, should not be perpetrating that kind of violence on anyone. We brought this to the attention of the world after World War II in the Nuremberg trials, and obviously with a name like Nirenberg, you become very sensitive to the purposes and the results of those trials, the Nuremberg trials. And it was always a source of pride that here in the United States, it was sort of a safety zone. It was where people could express themselves. They could live a fruitful life free of totalitarianism, free of government intervening in their lives in such an underground manner, free of the idea of getting into wars that are undeclared by Congress, free of the idea that we are electing a king for 4 years. And yet, that's what it appears when Congress, even after it changes control from Republican to Democrat, still persists in supporting a president's illegal war, still persists in being afraid to confront the president on his support of torture, free of the dissent that we had as a public voted to bring to Washington, D.C. So what is a citizen to do? In my case, I believe that the letters aren't enough, calling your congressman isn't enough, although both are necessary. And I had some time on my hands. I was fortunate to have a little bit of resources to devote to this, although my retirement is now at stake. But I think it's important enough because the nature of our republic, the whole idea of the American dream, in my view, has been threatened. And if we allow this administration to perpetuate a disregard for the Constitution, future administrations will likewise disregard that document. And in my view, then, the contract that we have had with history is over. And this country is no longer the democratic experiment that it was, and it becomes something else. And that's something I'm not willing to watch happen. It's not something I'm willing to sit by and just do nothing while it happens. During the course of the walk, it's 485 miles, by the way, if you check it out on a map. The route will take me down most of Route 1, U.S. Route 1, the first post road. The route that I would imagine many of the colonial revolutionary supporters had traveled to discuss the circumstances of the relationship between the colonies and the king. And it seems appropriate also to make it personal, because I believe that we're now in this era of grand strategy and spinning, and we've lost touch with our principles and what people really believe in and what they're willing to aspire to. And so in walking to Washington, D.C., I hope to meet a lot of people who can talk to me about their ideas of what's going on, what should be done, what citizenship means, what this constitutional crisis means to them, and what they're willing to do to help repair this situation. And I hope you'll come out to visit us on the walk. There will be many people at different places who will join with me to walk for a mile or 2 miles or maybe 100 miles, because they too believe that this era of fear, this era of lawlessness at the highest levels of our government must come to an end. And that impeachment is the tool our forefathers, our constitutional founders, had given us to utilize against extraordinary abuses of power. And so I urge you to do something. Whatever it is that you can imagine would be appropriate for you to express your displeasure, discomfort, dissatisfaction with this current administration. But in all cases, I hope you do something to save the Constitution. So if you can come out on December 1st at Faneuil Hall at 3 p.m., we'll have a gathering there and we'll start our march. But if you can't make that, or if you can't make a visit to your own congressperson, I'm ready to march in your name. And so the website, marchinmyname.org. And as I march, I will be holding up this sign that basically says that in order for us to save our Constitution, we must impeach Bush and Cheney. And I urge everyone that sees this sign to note Nancy Pelosi's telephone number, area 202-225-0100, and to call her, to tell her this is serious stuff. It's not about spin. It's not about strategies for electing someone else in 2008. If we don't speak up now, I'm afraid, personally, that it's lost, that the Constitution will never recover from this. So I urge you to do something. When you're looking around this website, marchinmyname.org, you might stumble on a way for you to support. Even though you can't come out to the march, you can't go to Washington, I'd like to represent you in expressing your discomfort with the current situation and help you tell Congress that you support the idea of hearings to impeach the president and the vice president for their illegal actions.